Mayonnaise. It's creamy, tangy, and the secret weapon behind your favorite sandwiches, burgers, and salads. But here's the catch. Not all mayo is made equal. Some of those store-bought jars you've been spreading on your toast or mixing in your potato salad are loaded with hidden dangers. We're talking inflammatory oils, chemical preservatives, added sugars, and even questionable natural flavors that are anything but natural. So before you dip that spoon into another jar, listen up, because today we're breaking down the worst mayonnaise brands you should avoid at all costs, and then revealing a few healthier alternatives that'll give you all that creamy goodness without the toxic extras. Stick around till the end, because the last one might surprise you. I'm starting with brand number 1, Hellmann's Real Mayonnaise. This is the blue and yellow jar nearly everyone recognizes. It's sold nationwide across the U.S., exported globally, and owned by a multinational food conglomerate. It's marketed with one word that disarms scrutiny: real. When I held the jar in my hand, it felt heavy, dependable, like something that hadn't changed in decades. But when I flipped it over, the story shifted. The first ingredient isn't eggs. It's soybean oil. Not cold-pressed, not lightly refined. This is industrially processed soybean oil, commonly sourced from genetically modified crops and refined through high-heat chemical deodorization. That matters because refining strips natural antioxidants, leaving an oil chosen for cost and stability, not nutrition. Then I noticed something else: calcium disodium EDTA. This isn't flavor, it's a chelating agent, designed to bind metal ions and slow oxidation so the product keeps its color and shelf life. According to U.S. regulations, EDTA is permitted in mayonnaise up to 75 parts per million. That number isn't random. It exists because regulators know this compound doesn't belong in unlimited amounts in food. If this is real mayonnaise, why does it require a compound engineered to preserve industrial emulsions for months? When I tasted it slowly alone, without bread or salt to mask it, the texture felt slick, almost oily, with a flat finish that lingered longer than expected. Longtime consumers have noticed the same thing. The mouthfeel has changed. The richness feels manufactured. Hellmann's has reformulated multiple times to ensure consistency across massive distribution networks. In 2014, the brand made headlines for suing a small startup, Hampton Creek, over the use of the word mayo. The lawsuit was dropped after public backlash, but the message was clear. Protecting the brand mattered more than re-examining what real should mean. From a health perspective, frequent use contributes to a diet already overloaded with refined omega-6 fats, which consumer advocacy groups have repeatedly flagged as problematic when consumed excessively in modern diets dominated by ultra-processed foods. The risk here isn't immediate illness, it's quiet accumulation. Now, brand number 2, Kraft Real Mayonnaise. Kraft's jar looks friendly, almost nostalgic. It's everywhere: supermarkets, cafeterias, backyard barbecues. When I opened it, the smell was mild, slightly sweet. That sweetness isn't accidental. Kraft adds sugar, not for tradition, but to compensate for the blandness of heavily refined oils. 2 tablespoons, an amount most people exceed, without noticing, deliver nearly 100 calories and about 10 grams of fat, the majority again coming from soybean oil. Then there's the preservation system. Kraft relies on potassium sorbate and calcium disodium EDTA to keep the emulsion stable over long storage periods. These compounds are FDA approved, but they exist for one reason: to allow a product to sit on shelves, in warehouses, and in transport for extended periods without separating or spoiling. This isn't kitchen logic, it's logistics logic. When I tested it in food mixed into a simple tuna salad, the oil pooled faster than expected. The flavor didn't deepen, it flattened. That's when the pattern became obvious: sugar to mask oil, preservatives to extend life, branding to imply authenticity. Over time, regular consumption adds low-quality calories, excess refined fats, and unnecessary additives to daily meals. Again, not a dramatic toxin, just an everyday nudge in the wrong direction. I moved on to brand number 3, Duke's Mayonnaise. In the South, this jar isn't just food, it's identity. I found it stacked high in regional grocery chains, praised as the no-sugar option, the one that supposedly stayed true while others sold out. Duke's earns credit for skipping added sugar. That's real. But then the numbers come in. 1 tablespoon carries roughly 90 milligrams of sodium. That sounds small until you do what people actually do: 2 spoonfuls for chicken salad, 3 for potato salad, more when it becomes the base of a dip. Sodium adds up quietly. And Duke's also uses calcium disodium EDTA to stabilize color and prevent oxidation. Again, legal, again, engineered. EDTA exists here for the same reason it exists everywhere else: long shelf life under mass distribution. I tasted Duke's straight, then on plain bread. The tang hits fast, sharper than Hellmann's, but the finish drops off quickly. The texture feels dense but slightly hollow, like something calibrated to behave the same way every time. After Duke's parent company changed hands, longtime consumers started noticing differences, flavor shifts, texture inconsistencies. From a health standpoint, Duke's sits in a gray zone. It's not the worst option on the shelf, but it isn't clean either. Regular use still means frequent exposure to refined soybean oil, added sodium, and stabilizers. Over time, that combination can contribute to water retention, elevated blood pressure in sodium-sensitive individuals, and the same low-grade inflammatory load common to ultra-processed foods. The risk isn't dramatic. It's cumulative. Duke's doesn't break the rules, it just benefits from how low the rules are set. Then came brand number 4, Miracle Whip. This one required a pause because it's not even mayonnaise by regulatory definition. Under U.S. standards, mayonnaise must contain at least 65% vegetable oil by weight. Miracle Whip doesn't meet that threshold. That's why the label avoids the word mayonnaise. Yet culturally, people use it the same way. That disconnect matters. Miracle Whip was created during the Great Depression as a cheaper alternative, and it still carries that DNA. When I read the label, the structure was clear: high fructose corn syrup, modified cornstarch, vinegar, flavorings, preservatives. 1 tablespoon clocks in at about 40 calories lower than traditional mayo, but those calories come largely from sugar and starch rather than fat. That's the trade-off: less oil, more engineered sweetness, and thickeners. I tasted it alone. Sweetness hit first, then acidity. The texture felt airy but artificial, like it was built rather than emulsified. HFCS exists here to do 2 things: create instant palatability and encourage repeat use. And while regulators allow it, research has consistently linked high intake of fructose-heavy sweeteners to metabolic strain when consumed frequently, especially when they show up in foods people don't expect to be sweet. The violation here isn't legal, it's perceptual. Miracle Whip looks like mayo, sits next to mayo, and gets used like mayo, but nutritionally, it pulls your diet towards sugars, additives, and lab-designed textures. For someone trying to eat lighter, it can actually backfire, replacing fats with sugars that spike insulin and increase cravings later. Next, I turn to brand number 5, Kewpie Mayonnaise. This one has a reputation that travels fast. Japanese origin, squeeze bottle, ultra creamy texture. I've seen it praised by chefs, food bloggers, and home cooks as if it were in a different category altogether. When I picked up the bottle, the design felt playful, almost innocent. But once again, I went to the numbers. Depending on the market, Kewpie is not one product, it's at least 2. The Japanese version and the US version differ in formulation, and that alone raises a transparency question. What most consumers encounter in American supermarkets contains canola oil and soybean oil as the base. Both are refined seed oils chosen for stability and cost. Then comes the flavor engine, monosodium glutamate, or MSG. MSG isn't illegal, then there's sodium. 1 tablespoon of Kewpie delivers roughly 100 milligrams of sodium. Again, that's not alarming on paper, but Kewpie isn't used sparingly. It's slathered on sushi rolls, mixed into tuna, folded into sauces. The accumulation is the issue. Add to that calcium disodium EDTA used once more to stabilize color and shelf life, and a small amount of added sugar to balance acidity. Each component serves a purpose. None of them exist for nourishment. I squeezed some onto a spoon and tasted it plain. The umami hit immediately, deeper and more addictive than the Western brands. That's the point. MSG amplifies flavor so effectively that it can make average ingredients feel exceptional. But it also trains the palate to expect intensity. Over time, that can dull sensitivity to simpler foods and push consumption higher without conscious intent. Then I moved to brand number 6, Sir Kensington's. This jar tells a different story. Glass packaging, minimalist design, words like non-GMO, and cage-free eggs. It looks like something you'd trust without question. And that's exactly why I slowed down with it. Sir Kensington swaps soybean oil for sunflower oil. On the surface, that sounds like an upgrade. But sunflower oil, especially the refined, high omega-6 version commonly used in commercial mayonnaise, can deliver a disproportionately high load of linoleic acid. In diets already saturated with omega-6 fats, this imbalance has been flagged by consumer advocacy groups as a contributor to inflammatory signaling when intake consistently outweighs omega-3s. When I tasted it, the texture was impressively smooth, almost too perfect. It spread evenly, held peaks, never broke. That kind of consistency doesn't happen by accident. It happens through precise processing. Sir Kensington's doesn't use EDTA, which sounds reassuring, but stability can be achieved through other industrial techniques that don't show up as single red flag ingredients. Health-wise, this is where perception becomes risk. Because it looks clean, people use more. Because it feels premium, scrutiny drops. Over time, the added sugars, omega-6 heavy oil, and hidden flavor systems quietly add to dietary load without triggering alarm. This brand doesn't lie outright. It simply lets the packaging do the persuading. By the end of this section of the investigation, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Whether the label says global favorite or upscale artisan, the underlying mechanics stay consistent. Flavor amplification, shelf stability, ingredient ambiguity, different masks, same structure, and that set the stage for the final contrast, a product that doesn't pretend to be Mayo at all, and one that actually changes the rules. So when I reached brand number 7, Wishbone Mayo Dressing, I knew exactly what to look for. This product doesn't even fully commit to being mayonnaise. It calls itself a mayo dressing, which sounds lighter, almost responsible. I found it positioned next to traditional mayo jars, marketed as a flavorful alternative, something you could use freely without guilt. The ingredient list told a different story. The base is still a blend of soybean oil and canola oil, both refined seed oils chosen for cost efficiency and shelf stability. Then come the numbers that matter. Sodium levels run noticeably high, designed to boost flavor where real ingredients are lacking. Added sugar appears again, small on the label but effective in balancing acidity and encouraging repeat use. And just like several brands before it, Wishbone relies on calcium disodium EDTA to maintain color and extend shelf life. When I opened the jar, the smell was sharper than expected. On the tongue, it tasted thin, slightly sweet. They're aggressively seasoned like something engineered to perform rather than nourish. This is the quiet trick of dressings. Because they don't claim to be mayo, expectations drop. People pour instead of spoon. They use more. What feels like a healthier swap becomes a higher intake of refined oils, sodium, and additives. Over time, that combination can push blood pressure upward, increase water retention, and reinforce dependence on heavily seasoned foods to feel satisfied. Wishbone doesn't break rules. This is where I introduced the first brand I actually recommend, Primal Kitchen. The difference was immediate, not just on paper, but in my hands. The jar felt lighter, the ingredient list was shorter. Avocado oil sits at the top, not as a marketing flourish, but as the structural base. No soybean oil, no canola oil, no sunflower oil, and notably, no calcium disodium EDTA. That absence matters because it tells you something about priorities. Avocado oil is naturally rich in monounsaturated fats, similar to olive oil, and far more resistant to oxidation than many refined seed oils. That stability reduces the need for chemical preservatives. Primal Kitchen also skips added sugar entirely. When I tasted it on its own, the flavor was clean and restrained. It didn't linger artificially, it didn't coat the mouth. It behaved like food, not a system. From a numbers perspective, the difference shows up in formulation philosophy rather than shock value. You're still consuming fat, you're still consuming calories, but you're not stacking unnecessary variables. No parts per million thresholds, no flavor disguises. No stabilizers designed to survive months in fluctuating warehouses. Third-party testing and labeling standards back up the claims, and the ingredient transparency makes verification possible instead of theoretical. Health-wise, this doesn't mean Primal Kitchen is a cure or a superfood. It means it removes several layers of everyday risk. Fewer refined oils, no hidden sugars, no chelating agents. Over time, that translates into less inflammatory load, better lipid balance, and a condiment that doesn't quietly undermine the rest of your food choices. It also changes behavior. When flavor isn't artificially amplified, portions naturally moderate. This section marked a shift in the investigation. Until now, everything pointed to what to avoid. Wishbone showed how easily products disguise themselves as lighter options while delivering the same industrial payload. Primal Kitchen proved the opposite, that mayonnaise doesn't need chemical scaffolding to exist, and that realization reframed the question. The issue isn't whether mayo is good or bad. It's whether it's built for kitchens or for supply chains. After seeing how much difference formulation alone can make, I moved to the second brand I recommend, Chosen Foods Avocado Oil Mayo. I didn't approach this one with optimism. I approached it with suspicion because when brands start using words like clean, pure, or responsibly sourced, I've learned to slow down, not speed up. So I did the same thing I've done throughout this investigation. I held the jar, I turned it over, I read every line. The first thing that stood out was what wasn't there. No soybean oil, no canola oil, no sunflower oil. The base is 100% avocado oil and not blended, not diluted. That matters because avocado oil is naturally more stable under heat and oxidation. Stability reduces the need for chemical intervention, and sure enough, there was no calcium disodium EDTA anywhere on the label, no parts per million limits to worry about, no metal binding agents quietly doing damage control behind the scenes. Chosen Foods also skips added sugar entirely. 0. Not less than 1 gram. Not disguised under a different name. Just absent. The egg source is listed clearly, and the rest of the ingredient list stays short enough that you don't need a nutrition background to understand it. When companies make it easy to understand what you're eating, that's usually a sign they're not hiding much. I tasted it plain, then with food. The texture was creamy but lighter than expected, not airy, not sticky. It didn't cling aggressively to the palate. And that's an important detail because hyperpalatable textures are one of the reasons people overconsume condiments without realizing it. This one didn't push. It just existed. That subtlety changes behavior. From a health perspective, this isn't about turning mayonnaise into a wellness product. It's about reducing unnecessary exposure. By removing refined seed oils, you reduce excessive omega-6 intake that already dominates many modern diets. By avoiding added sugars, you avoid hidden glucose spikes that don't belong in savory foods. And by eliminating preservatives designed for long-haul distribution, you reduce the background load of additives your body has to process day after day. Over time, those small reductions matter more than dramatic short-term changes. This brings me to the most important part of the investigation: how to recognize mayonnaise that works against you, and how to use even the better ones responsibly. There are 3 questions I now ask every single time, without exception. First, what oil is listed first? If it's a refined seed oil, I stop there. Second, is there added sugar or natural flavors? If yes, I know flavor is being engineered. Third, is there EDTA or another stabilizer designed to extend shelf life? If so, the product was built for logistics, not kitchens. Even with better options, use matters. Mayonnaise should be a condiment, not a base. When it becomes the foundation of meals, salads, ice spreads, dips the numbers stack quickly. 2 tablespoons turn into 4, 4 turn into 6. Calories, fats, and sodium accumulate quietly, and when time allows, I make it myself. 5 minutes. Egg yolk, avocado oil, or light olive oil, vinegar or lemon, salt. No mystery, no stabilizers, no numbers buried in regulations. Just food behaving like food. After everything I've seen, this isn't about cutting mayonnaise out of your life. It's about cutting through the illusion. Over and over, I found the same pattern products designed to feel safe, familiar, even comforting, while quietly optimized for shelf life, cost, and scale. None of that shows up on the front label. You only see it when you slow down, turn the jar around, and follow the numbers. If there's one takeaway from this investigation, it's this: trust ingredients and not branding. Ask simple questions. What oil is doing the heavy lifting? Is sugar hiding where it doesn't belong? Are preservatives propping up something that should stand on its own? Those questions don't require expertise, just attention. If this breakdown helped you see your food a little more clearly, stay with me. There are more everyday products that deserve the same level of scrutiny. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and keep questioning what's sold as normal.